Regional diplomacy is in the works as President Park Geun-hye seeks fresh opportunities of cooperation with Russia and China at a time when change is in high demand. Talks for a new currency swap deal between Seoul and Tokyo are set to take place after finance ministers from the two countries strike a surprise agreement. Welcome to News Inside. I'm An Chang-hyun. Let's meet our panelists. Professor Shin Sang-yup from Kyung University Graduate School of International Studies is back. And Dr. Pong Young-sik from Yonsei University Institute for North Korea Studies is with us as well. President Park Geun-hye is on a tour to Russia and China for the Eastern Economic Forum and the G20 summit. What are some of the top items on the agenda? We'll take a closer look.
President Park Geun-hye has embarked on a one-week tour, heading to Russia, Hangzhou in China, and then Laos. The first stop is Russia's Vladivostok to attend the Second Eastern Economic Forum, organized by Moscow, as it looks to bolster cooperation with neighboring Asian countries in developing the Far East. For Korean companies, it represents new opportunities for growth in the vast region. In following summit talks between Korea and Russia, President Park Geun-hye and President Vladimir Putin discuss how to enhance cooperation on the economic front and in dealing with Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. Over in Hangzhou in China, the G20 brings together leaders from around the world over the course of 2 days. Meetings such as this give heads of state the chance to discuss ways to pull out of slumbering trade and low growth in the global economy. Leaders from the U.S., Japan, and other G7 countries, 12 emerging economies including Korea, China, and Russia, as well as the EU country of presidency, make up the G20 nations. Not only that, a growing number of non-G20 countries also take part in the gathering to discuss long-term strategies for global growth. In her back-to-back trips to neighboring countries, Russia and China, President Park Geun-hye faces the task of balancing economic and geopolitical interests on the global stage. We'll look at what to expect from the latest tour to this region.
This is the fourth meeting between President Park and President Putin, and Russia apparently went the extra mile to make sure that President Park would attend. On the other hand, it wasn't quite the same for North Korea. Apparently, a much lower-ranking delegation was invited.
Yeah, there are many clear signs that Russia desperately need to invite President Park Geun-hye to make this Eastern Economic Forum a huge success. As you said, this will be the fourth meeting between the two leaders, starting from the G20 summit meeting in Russia in September 2013, and the second meeting, President Putin's visit to Seoul in November 2013, and both leaders also met over the UN Climate Change Conference, the COP21 in Paris. So this will be the fourth meeting. And compared to the first EEF, when Russian government invited the Minister of Commerce and Industry of both Koreas, this time Russian government arranged a separate meeting between foreign ministers and delivered a very clear message to Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se that they really wanted President Park Geun-hye to attend, and she is going to make the keynote speech in this forum. So there's a clear difference between the way that Russian government treats South Korea and they does North Korea.
And President Park is traveling with a business delegation of 100 people. In terms of economic cooperation, where do things stand between Korea and Russia?
Well, when we analyze the economic cooperation between two countries, we focused on mainly two things: the trade volume and investment volume. Well, if I tell you about the trade volume between Korea and Russia, well, as of the end of 2014, the trade volume reached $26 billion, about $26 billion, which was about only 2.3% out of total Korean trade volume. And in fact, Russia has been about 12 the major trading partners of Korea. But particularly, I want to emphasize the trade with the Far Eastern area in Russia. In fact, the trade with these regions, trade volume reached about $10 billion as of 2014, which was about 0.9% out of total Korean trade volume. So we can say that Far Eastern part of Russia has been the center of the trade with Korea. And let me talk about the investment volume. In fact, the Korean investment into Russia as of the end 2014 was $2.2 billion. Let me look at the future economic cooperation between two countries. I mean, we have to focus on the new policies introduced by and adopted by the Putin administration. They just started to focus on the development of the Far Eastern area. They want to make this area as the engine of their new economy. And they also had some long-term plan to develop the new project, which called Nasan and Hassan projects, even though this is blocked because of the UN sanction against North Korea. And also they have a plan to establish the EEU, Eurasian Economic the Union. They wanted to strengthen their efforts to activate this the proposal. All these issues could be the main agenda between two countries to step up the economic cooperation.
So obviously there's a lot of room for improvement
Yes.
for economic cooperation. Now, we know that President Putin has very long-term development plans for the Far East, and he's been aggressively pushing for expansion in the region by going so far as to hand out land for free. What would be the political significance behind this?
China has been enlarging its influence in the Far East, and Russia has not come up with a good response to it. So China's strategic value has been constantly increasing. So this invitation is one of the clear signals that Russia desperately needs to join hands with South Korea to take over Far East. And let me tell you that this is not the first time that Russia or the former Soviet Union recognize the strategic value of South Korea as a pioneering economic powerhouse that can help Russia or the Soviet Union to develop Far East. You remember the former Soviet Union's General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev expressed a great deal of interest in cooperating with South Korean companies, especially Daewoo construction company. In private realms, Mikhail Gorbachev praised resiliency and the commitment of the Korean workers in the construction industries, that in order for us to actually develop Siberia and Far Eastern region, we have to rely on Korean cooperation, not Japanese cooperation or American cooperation, but can-do people who can fight off the inclement weather and all the difficult conditions. So Putin's strategy is kind of a revival of the same strategy conclusion that had been already drawn by his predecessor in the 1990s.
Now, the Russian Far East is known for its rich natural resources, so there must be some business potential for Korean companies there.
Well, as Dr. Bong already pointed out, the construction industry has been quite successful. Very recently, the Korean the transportation and the logistics industry tried to enter into Russia to expand and deepen their business activities. Yes, there are much possibilities, and also the remaining maybe could be the blue ocean in the economic cooperation between two countries would be the farming and then the biochemical sector, because that the Russia wanted to develop this area. Well, actually, in 2012, the Putin announced that they will putting more priorities on this area as the engine of the economic development. So certainly, and also the energy development industry. So this can be a kind of some the area which the South Korean industries and the Russian industries can work together.
There's also hope that Russia's rapid development in the Far East will help open up the North Korean economy, and it seems talks are already underway between the two sides.
I think so. Actually, since 2007, connecting Russia, North Korea, and South Korea with LNG pipeline have been on the agenda for three-country cooperation. And only a few years ago, combining the Russian desire to develop the Far Eastern regions and develop alternative market for its LNG instead of the European market and the Eurasian vision of the Park Geun-hye administration have been actually substantially debated by both governments. And according to their initial plan, then the entire length of the gas pipeline from Siberia through North Korea to South Korea would generate the annual fee of in the north of $3 million for transition fee for North Korea, and which was to be believed to be a kind of seed money to help develop the initial capitalism inside North Korea. But it was a very difficult proposition to actually realize because the entire length of the gas pipeline was 150 kilometers for Russian territory and additional 232 kilometers inside South Korea, and North Korea would have occupied 740 kilometers for the entire pipelines to be completed, and the entire construction cost was estimated to be about $4 billion. So we have to see if this Eurasian initiative and any major agreements made in this Eastern Economic Forum would come to fruition, then this idea may be revived before the end of this administration.
And if that happens, if we see all these changes happening in the Far East, Russia would likely take on a more important role in inter-Korean relations. What would be a decisive factor in securing Russia's cooperation?
When you have the competitive advantages in the competition with other countries such as China and Japan, who are major players in the Russian economy, definitely we can step up our economic cooperation with Russia. For example, very recently, Putin administration tried to invite huge investment, foreign direct investment from China, and they have announced a series of the measures to attract the Chinese the investment in particularly manufacturing sector. So I think we cannot avoid the competition with China and Japan, particularly at the moment. When you look at the current relationship between two countries, we cannot make such a huge investment like the Chinese can do. So the number one factor in the economic field front is that we have to find what we can do better than the countries such as China and Japan. It will be very important. It will be a decisive factor determining the relationship between two countries.
But it seems like the Putin administration is very conscious that the Chinese influence in the Far Eastern market should be limited by introducing more countries, especially South Korea and Japan.
Right.
Because there was only 6.2 million Russians populated in the Far Eastern region, and it is only in the neighborhood of the huge Chinese population in the northern three provinces. So it would be against Russia's strategic interest to just let the Far Eastern regions to be increasingly dominated by Chinese companies and population. So it is necessary for Russia to include South Korea in the development of Far Eastern region. And another strategic importance of including South Korea is that Russia has only come up with its own vision of a long-term economic development in response to other countries' economic plans, such as South Korea's creative economy. Japan had Abenomics, China, One Belt, One Road. And interestingly, the direction of China's One Belt, One Road economic developmental plan is not eastward toward Asia Pacific, but toward Europe, the westward. But Russia's plan, the long-term plan, is toward the Asia Pacific region, toward the Far Eastern region. So in that case, if Russia mishandled the whole plan, then it would allow China not only increase its economic sphere of influence toward Europe in the west, but also Far Eastern region toward the east. That's totally against Russia's long-term strategic interest.
Yes, it's correct. I think exactly that is the situation happening in the region right now. But I think this can be called the agony for Russian side. That is, well, for example, in these area, I mean, Far Eastern Russian area seems to be very, very important for the Russian economy. But the reality facing them over there is not that much favorable for their efforts. For example, the number of population has been reduced very dramatically over there. And then, well, when the foreign investors consider whether they make a foreign direct investment in a specific location or not, the local condition seems to be very important. And political stability seems to be the number one factor. Well, considering those kind of factors, well, Russia, particularly Far Eastern Russia, does not have very favorable the conditions for the foreign investors. So to attract the foreign direct investment from China, maybe they can be the first step to attract the further investment from Korea and other countries. When that will be the first step to achieve the maturity in their
building credibility
Right.
in the eyes of the
Right.
potential
Right.
investors. And another strategic obstacle that Putin's Russia has to deal with is the economic sanctions imposed by European countries after the Ukraine crisis. So basically, the projection of economic development by Russia toward European continent has been blocked. So by default, the Far Eastern region has emerged as a more or less more attractive and viable alternative.
Economics aside, when we consider the regional power dynamics, we can't leave the U.S. and China out of the picture. So from Russia's point of view, there must be some geopolitical role that Korea can play.
Yes, and Russia has some premiums to play with. Compared to other major powers in Northeast Asia, interestingly, Russia has not serious historical issues with any other countries. Maybe the Northern Territory issues with Japan, but since 1956 agreement, then that issue has been kind of kept in low-key. So compared to Japan-China or Korea-Japan relations, Russia's potential relations with other countries in the region is free from historical obstacles. And Russia is also free from alliance entanglements to Korea's, U.S.-Japan versus China, South China Sea. So Russia is not really in a dire position to project its strategic impetus in the region compared to other countries.
Now let's move on to the G20 Hangzhou Summit. What are some things worth noting about this meeting?
Well, there must be political and economic issues. The first one, political issue, well, definitely, as we know very well, because of the THAAD deployment. And then not only THAAD deployment, but also the initiative issues, in the region. There must be some confrontation between USA and competition between USA and China. So at the G20 summit, well, definitely there must be some issues, because those issues was more related to multilateral dimension rather than bilateral dimension. So at G20 would be the best place for them to discuss about. And second one is the economic issue. Definitely the global economy has been in the financial crisis or economic crisis over the last several years. So the economic growth, global economic growth rate would be about 3%, and which is quite low than expectation. So in the middle of such a kind of economic difficulties, at this G20 summit, the leaders should discuss about how to revitalize the slowdown global economy. And second one is, actually, the protectionism is rising because of the economic difficulties. Definitely, everybody knows the outcomes of the protectionism. But the reality is quite different from our wish. When you look at the USA, well, even the Clinton, who was against the protectionism, but she recently changed her stance about the protectionism. So definitely the world leaders should have to discuss about how to prevent the spread of the protectionism in the world.
I'm really sure that in the back room they'll be talking about Donald Trump.
Now, last week, the UN Security Council condemned North Korea for its latest missile launch, and both China and Russia came on board to back the statement. Do you think this was a gesture of goodwill on their part ahead of these big events like the EEF and G20?
I had to confess that I was quite surprised by a very swift endorsement by both China and Russia to claim that the North Korea's action was in clear violation of a UN Security Council resolution. I think from the standpoint of China, as a hosting country of G20, maintaining the right atmosphere for the event was primary importance. And China has been maintaining the three main principles with regard to North Korea's provocations with nuclear weapons and missiles. That first, no nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, and the issue should be resolved through dialogue and negotiations. And China, hopes to maintain stability and peace on the Korean Peninsula. So, in that regard, it is a repetition of long-standing three principles of China with regard to North Korea's nuclear ambitions on the Korean Peninsula. But the manner in which China, in conjunction with Russia, joined the Western countries in condemning North Korea, that was a quite eye-opening action.
Now, for the leaders Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, this will be their 18th meeting at the G20. So it's almost every other month that they've met.
Right,
since
I
taking
counted a
office.
number, then it will be the 18th meeting, and in 2014 they met 5 times, and last year, 2015, they also met 5 times. So as you said, that on average, it's like they're meeting
every
once
other
in
month.
2 months.
Yeah.
And I don't even see my best high school friend once in 2 months.
What could they have to talk about that much?
Well, we have to ask them, but it seems like they must have a lot of things to share and coordinate with. That means that even North Korea, which used to be regarded by and large their common security asset and security partner, has been causing more troubles and headaches than strategic benefits for these two countries who are coping with the United States and its allies. So how to maintain the right balance in controlling their common security partners, including North Korea, as well as reformulating their common stance with countries which have been taking rather neutral positions between China, Russia on one hand, and the United States, Japan, South Korea on the other hand, namely ASEAN countries and Central Asian countries, and how to respond to the consolidation of the security partnership among US, Japan, and South Korea. These are all very complicated and numerous agendas of great interest for China and Russia. So considering that, then we may not be too surprised to see them meeting once in 2 months.
Well, Professor Shin, you mentioned the possibility of the world leaders talking about the resurgence of trade protectionism. At a time like this, when we are seeing this resurgence of trade protectionism, I would imagine that multilateral fora like the G20 can play an even more important role.
Yes, it is. And then I think before discussing the answer to your question, we have to think about the G20 itself. As you know very well, G20 has member countries such as G7 member countries and 12 new member countries plus European Union. And then how strong, how significant role they have. When you look at the population of the G20 member countries, it take about the 65% out of total population, global population. In terms of GDP, they produce about 86%. So what I want to say is that they have very significant role and huge influences over the global economy. And the second point which I want to emphasize is actually when the global economy was hit by the crisis in 2008, G20 was formed and they managed to overcome such a crisis. So this is the prime forum which has an experience overcoming the economic difficulties, and it has the very influential member countries. So G20 has a very important role, certainly, in dealing with these issues. And the second point, actually, as I already explained before, when you look at the issues themselves, definitely it is not an issue related to 2 or 3 countries or few countries. It must be related to multilateral approaches. So in this context, I think the G20 is the best place, opportunity for the world leaders to tackle on this issue, I think.
So what do you think are Korea's strengths in a multilateral gathering like this?
Yes, I think, as we know very well, in 2010, we hosted the G20 summit already. Since that time on, the Korea has been, has taken quite a huge role in the at G20 summit. We already talked about creative economy, and also we have to emphasize the importance of the financial market stability, and then trade, the fair trade. Definitely, this stance will be kept by the Korean government at G20 summit. And then between China and US, we can play the bridge role. And between the advanced economies and emerging economies, definitely we can play a very important role in the connecting between or reducing the gap in the stance between 2 parties. So I think this can be the contribution which South Korean government can make at the G20 summit.
Now, when President Park embarked on this trip, one of the goals she probably had in mind was mending ties with China and Russia, especially after we experienced some trouble with the 2 countries over THAAD. Do you think she'll be able to achieve that goal?
I don't think that issue will be on the table. I think all the leaders will be consciously avoid talking about the THAAD, but rather exclusively focus on talking about economic cooperation. Considering the statement issued by Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se that we are going to focus on enlarging economic cooperation with China and Russia. I guess there is a kind of a dark cloud looming above the heads of all the leaders gathering for the G20 summit, which is whether and when North Korea is going to make another provocation, which is the 5th nuclear test or something similar to that. But before that actually happening, then I think in faithful commitment to the spirit of G20, I think the leaders will be focused on economic agendas as opposed to very specific security issues such as deployment of that.
Well, in other news, Korea and Japan have agreed to open talks on resuming a currency swap deal. The previous agreement expired early last year after a 14-year run. So what led to the resumption of the talks, and what can we expect from a new agreement?
In the recent 7th Finance Ministers meeting between Korea and Japan, the 2 countries agreed to hold talks to reopen a currency swap arrangement. Currency swap deals are set at a fixed exchange rate among different countries and held until maturity to hedge against financial volatility. In times of a foreign currency crisis, countries are able to swap their local currencies. Seoul and Tokyo first opened a currency swap line back in 2001 with $2 billion after Korea went through the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s. The deal grew in scale, peaking at $70 billion in 2011. But in 2012, relations began to sour between the 2 countries, especially after a visit to Dokdo Island by then-President Lee Myung-bak. In the end, the currency deal was left to expire last year without an extension. The decision to discuss reopening a currency swap arrangement has much to do with looming global financial uncertainties, such as the Brexit and an expected rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve. The two countries also agreed to work together to fight trade protectionism and move forward on the RCEP trade deal, as well as a trilateral free trade pact involving China.
So what can Korea gain from signing a currency swap deal with Japan, given the current external uncertainties?
Well, global economy became very uncertain, because in the middle of crisis. So in the middle of crisis, by having our swap deal with Japan, we can improve the stability of the financial market. Actually, we have to think about what swap is. Swap is, we send our money to, for example, Japan, and then as much as the money which we send to Japan, we can get the USA dollar or Japanese yen. So we have more Federal Reserves effect. I mean, more money in
foreign reserves.
Foreign reserves, yes. So I think, in economic the aspects, it is not bad. It's quite good. But as many some experts worry about, it can be used for political purposes, considering the past experience. Japan, they empathize that, if you do not agree on this issue, we will expire the swap deal contract. It can be like a tool for the Japanese government to twist the Korean government arms. So maybe some people are worried about maybe considering Korean the economic situation we face, particularly we have quite seventh largest foreign reserves in the world. So we don't have to hurry to start the talk about the swap deal with Japan right now.
Yeah, and Finance Minister Yudo said that Seoul proposed the talks and that Korea is looking to expand these deals with other countries. Why would that be? Because some people are worried that that may just be advertising to the world that Korea needs ample foreign exchange reserves.
That's a very important point. Actually, when you look at the concerning the worries maybe related to this deal, a swap deal. Maybe by having a swap deal with Japan in such a hurried manner, maybe we can give an image that Korean economy is in a bad shape. But the details of the swap between two countries could be changed a little bit. Comparing with the previous one. The details maybe will be determined in the negotiation between two countries. It is expected negotiation will last about 3 or 4 months. I think maybe we could prevent Japan from using this deal for their political purposes to some degree. For example, in the last contract, agreement, the total contracted amount money which both countries can get were different. For example, in Korea, we could get the $10 billion, while the Japanese maximum volume from the Korea-Japan swap deal was about 5 billion won. So we could get the more economic benefits from the swap deal, while Japanese could not do that. So that was one of the reasons giving the image that, Japan helped Korea in some sense. But this time, the Minister Yu emphasized that no, such a kind of differences will be eliminated. Both countries set the same amount of the maximum amount money in this agreement. That means that if we set the limit of the money at the 10 billion won, then both countries can get the money maximum at 10 billion, not the which
so
is
more
different.
Equal terms.
So we can build the image that this is the deal based on the equality, not the donors and helpers and the receivers, something like that.
So could there be a diplomatic purpose to this new agreement, such as trying to improve ties with Tokyo?
Right. Many people might have forgotten, but the default Japan policy of Park Geun-hye administration since its inauguration is a separation from politics from economics. The practice might not have been as complete as it was supposed to be, but that has been the default line. So reviving the swap deal is expression of South Korean government's desire to go back to the default policy that swap deal is a swap deal, and that should not be embroiled with a clash of emotions. The high point was, of course, the President Lee Myung-bak's visit to Dokdo and the Japanese protest, and the swap deal somehow became the symbol of emotional tug of war between the two countries, that we have influence over you, and go ahead, we are not going to be budged by your pressure. So swap deal was somehow influenced by the political and emotional clash between the two countries. I think the South Korean government wants to untie this tangling of political and nationalistic emotions and the economic calculations.
So we'll have to make sure that the terms are set so that Japan can't use it as a political tool against Korea. So we have still months to go before resuming the deal. What are the procedures left, and what kind of an agreement should we expect to see?
Well, the two ministers agreed on the start of negotiations. So the working level people will meet together, and they will discuss about details such as the range and size of currency of this program, and then maybe they will set up the schedule first, and then they will review the details one by one. For example, as I said before, the total contracted amount of money. We have a swap deal with China. Which is about the roughly $6 billion contract. Right. It's quite huge. But when you look at the economic characteristics of China, I think by having a swap deal with Japan, it's not bad. It's rather good for our economy. But as I said before, we have to review and consider the details of this program deal very thoroughly, to prevent from having the misuses of politically misuses of this deal, because in the middle of the economic difficulties, the deal is important, but the importance of the deal could be more important considering the outlook of the global economy. We have the not very bright outlook over the global economy next year, 2 or 3 years. So in the middle of those kind of things, financial stability, or stability in financial market, seems to be very, very important for the revitalization of international trade.
Well, it's time for us to wrap up. Your final thought of the week, Professor
Well,
Shin.
I want to emphasize the importance of the economic cooperation with Russia. Definitely, at the moment, the economic cooperation between two countries is not very strong yet. But I think by having the more activated economic cooperation with Russia, definitely we can step up our economic the maturity. So in this context, I think I wish the government can make a wise decision.
Dr. Bong.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the Korea-Russia cooperation this time in conjunction with the G20, because we know that Russia was expelled from G8, so-called the G7 plus 1. So Russia is desperate in that desperate need to have the international forum in which it could exercise its influence as a major power. And South Korea can play as a bridging role between Russia and other G7 countries, thanks to this G20 opportunity.
Well, thank you two very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
And that is all for this edition of News Inside. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more next week.